Hey everyone, and welcome to the first of a series of videos I'm going to name Filthy Openings. Now we've all heard of dirty tricks, dirty openings, but I want to do some absolutely filthy openings because these openings are just going to be absolute filth for your opponents to play against. And the first of these openings I want to discuss is the Wing Gambit against the French defence. So what I'm going to do is going to post maybe about 5 videos, example videos, of how top players have played the Wing Gambit, and I'll do a video covering what moves you should play, and hopefully you'll be able to use it in your own games and absolutely destroy your opponents. And the reason I'm going to start off with the Wing Gambit against the French is because I've been playing it since I was a junior player and I've had great results with it. It's a bit of a tricky opening and on occasion top players can manage it quite well. But if you want to play some blitz game online, bullet games, or even just classical chess with interesting positions, I recommend this opening highly. So what is the Wing Gambit? Well, I'll just go through it with you quickly. It's when white plays e4, black plays the French with e6, white plays knight to f3, and after d5, white plays e5. And what we're waiting for here is the move c5 from black, which I'm going to say is played 90% of the time. And here white plays a sacrifice, b4, and this is the Wing Gambit. And the point is, after c takes b4, I'm going to recommend playing d4 straight away. This just stops black from playing d4 themselves. And after knight c6, white plays a3. And basically white's just going to start creating a nice pawn centre and plonk their bishop onto d3 and sacrifice the pawn on b4. So there are many alternative moves for black in this position, but I'll just go through this variation because the game we're going to look through is very similar. Black can play bishop d7, and we take on b4 again, bishop takes b4 check, c3 and bishop a5. And these aren't the best moves that black can play, but after bishop d3 white gets a very nice solid setup, and this is a typical position that you get in the Wing Gambit. With very nice play for white because they've got this raking bishop, the knight's going to jump into g5, we can play h4 at some point, even play ideas like bishop to a3 and knight to a3. It's a very rich position for white to play. So let's just get back to e4 and we'll get it back into this game. This is between Mike Surtees and Jovanka Houska, played in British Championships in Liverpool 2008. And the key thing to note here is actually Mike Surtees is rated 2180 and Jovanka Houska is an IM rated 2405. So black has the rating advantage by over 200 points in this game. But Mike Surtees is known on the English circuit for playing very weird openings, and this is a great example. But here in this game, instead of playing e6, the game actually starts with the Caro-Kann, so c6 is played. White plays knight to e2. After d5, e5, c5 and b4, we get into this Wing Gambit. So it's come about in a different way, but white has now played b4, c takes b4 is played, and white plays d4. After knight c6, white plays a3, black plays e6, and as you'll see here we're into a French defence, but actually black's got a bit of a worse position. After a takes b4, bishop takes b4 and c3, bishop to a5. We're into that similar position that I mentioned earlier, except it's slightly different. So if we go back to the other position after the French defence, this is the move after bishop to a5. So you'll notice black's got their bishop on d7, and also white's got their knights on f3. But if we go back to the game, it's different. The black hasn't got their bishop on d7, but white has their knight now on e2. So this could make a very big difference to the game, but this game is just an example of how you can play the Wing Gambit against black players. So Mike Surtees played knight to g3, and if anything this knight move actually helps white's attack because now they can plonk the knight in on h5 for instance, and continue with moves like bishop d3, h4, with a very nice attack for white. So maybe black should play g6 here to stop knight to h5. Black played knight ge7, so at the moment black's just a pawn up, hasn't done anything wrong, they're just developing normally. But straight away white comes in with knight h5, attacking this pawn on g7. So black's got a decision to make about what to do here. If they play the move g6, this is absolutely terrible because knight to f6 would check. King f8 and bishop h6 is checkmate, so we can't do that. Another move maybe is King F8, but white will just continue nicely with bishop to d3 and prepare the move queen to g4 now. Again, playing g6 in this position would be terrible due to moves like bishop to h6 with check. So maybe black could play h6, but then queen g4 hits the pawn on g7. If g6 now, white can play knight to f6 with a very nice game, and this knight's on an incredible outpost. And black really can't castle, and this is all for the sake of a pawns. It's really hard to decipher what to do as black in this position. Maybe moves like knight to f5 could come, but then white can just castle and play moves like bishop to a3 with check, and white's got a very nice solid structure in this game. Just quickly going back to the bishop d3, black could play knight takes d4 because that pawn is pinned on c3, but then again queen g4 just wins for white, attacking the knight on d4 and threatening check on g7. So in the game, after knight h5, Jovanka played the logical move of just castling kingside to protect this pawn this way. But Surtees now develops really fast. He plays bishop g5, pins the knight on e7, and if h6 to kick this away, white will just simply play bishop d2 and prepare the move queen g4 again. Let's say knight g6, white can play bishop d3. And white's got a very nice game. As you'll see, this is typical of the Wing Gambit. These two bishops just rake down this board, and black just has to be quite careful. In the actual game though, bishop g5 was played, Jovanka played queen c7, and now there are some incredible moves on the board that can be played for white. Amazingly. I don't really think black's done much wrong in this game, but this is just a great example of how white can attack on this king side with relative ease. So in the game there are an array of options that white can play. For instance, actually, knight takes g7 works in this position. This is due to if king takes g7, white plays bishop to f6 with check. And if king g8, white should now take the bishop on a5 with rook takes a5. This is because if queen g4 straight away, knight g6 and queen g5, preparing queen to h6, but actually black's got a move to save everything. They can play knight takes d4, and the queen and bishop are now attacking this pawn on c3. And the knight can jump into f5 to defend this g7 square. So actually after king g8, white should now play rook takes a5, and after queen takes a5, now play queen g4. Because after knight g6 and queen g5, again preparing queen h6, if knight takes d4 now, preparing knight to f5, white just plays bishop d3 and covers the f5 square, stopping the knight jumping in, and can play queen h6 with ease. Just a quick note, in this position white could play bishop d3, but then actually black's got two pieces attacking the c3 pawn, so bishop takes c3 can be played. So this is why rook takes a5 is vital in this little line. Back to the game though, after queen c7, so we just covered knight takes g7, but Mike Surtees was onto this already, so he takes the bishop on a5 actually with the rook straight away. So rook takes a5, queen takes a5, and now he plays knight takes g7. So again, if king takes g7, we get into the same line. Bishop to f6, king g8, queen g4, knight g6, queen g5, knight takes d4 and bishop d3, knight to f5 and bishop takes f5, and this will be game over for black fairly soon, because black's just got total domination over the dark squares. So in the game, after knight takes g7, Jovanka played the move f5, stopping the bishop coming into d3, for the time being anyway. E takes f6 wasn't a bad move, white just wins their pawn back. After knight to f5, white can continue knight takes f5, e takes f5, and play bishop to e2. If black continues developing, white can castle, and if a move like rook a8, e8, there's bishop h5, and these two bishops are really powerful for white. If rook e6, there's queen b3, and actually here white is the exchange down, but has excellent compensation in the form of these two bishops. For instance, b6, white plays bishop to f3 and targets this incredibly weak d5 pawn. Back to the game though, after f5, Surtees didn't take the pawn, he just played knight to h5. I think this is a better move because now he's just preparing to play moves like knight to f6, and frankly that's quite unstoppable, and black's kingside is a total mess. In the game, Jovanka now played knight to g6, and of course white plays knight to f6. I think here black should admit that they're losing. I think they should just play rook takes f6. After bishop takes f6, obviously white is still clearly better, but it's a lot better than what happened in the actual game. After knight to f6, if the king decides to run away, white can play queen h5, hits the pawn on h7. If rook protects it, then knight takes h7. And black is really stuck because bishop f6 is coming quite fast. The knight's pinned on g6, and the only way to defend it actually is rook g8. And after bishop to f6, white prepares knight g5 check. And all our pieces are infiltrating black's position. It's just a bit awful to play black here. So in the game, after knight to f6, Jovanka played king h8. And Surtees made another sacrifice. He played knight takes h7, again destroying the king side. So what happens if the king recaptures? Well, queen h5 comes. And after king g7, there's queen h6 with check. If king g8, then queen takes g6, king h8 and bishop to f6. The rook is forced to recapture this. After e takes f6, queen g7 is threatening mate. So after queen c7 to stop this, white plays f7, threatening getting a queen, and queen g8 checkmate. So after queen h6, king f7 is pretty much the only move, and again white can play queen h7. After king e8, the only move, there's queen takes g6 with check. After rook f7, then white can simply play bishop to e2, threatening bishop h5. If knight to e7, takes, and bishop h5 anyway, and there's no way to actually save this rook, because if rook f8, there's queen g7, and it's going to be mate in a few moves. So, after knight takes h7 from white, queen c7 was played, Surtees took the rook, the knight recaptured, and bishop to f6 was played with check, king g8, and Surtees played a very nice move, g4, preparing g takes f5, followed by rook g1. So black tries to ignore this, plays f4, but now they get the last pieces into the game with bishop to d3. Black tries some counterplay on the other side of the board, but it's too little too late. After g5, queen h5 is coming very quick. They played b4, but now just queen h5. And white's threatening to play the move g6, followed by queen h8, which is checkmate. Bishop a6 may have been a try, but again this doesn't work. So queen h8 check, king f7 and g6 with check. And if king e8, g7, and white's in a nicely won position. So after queen h5 from white, black played knight to e7, and then just came g6 with queen h8 on the cards. And actually black resigned in this position. So remember, this is a 2-180 defeating a 2,400 rated player. Actually, not just defeating, absolutely destroying. And the only way for black to continue here is if the knight recaptures the pawn. If knight takes, the bishop takes, knight takes, and white can play rook g1 and get the last piece into the game. If queen h7, rook takes g6, and then it's just game over. King f7, check, king f8, and rook g8 would be checkmate. So this is the power of the Wing Gambit. Obviously this game was slightly unusual due to the different weird move order. But who would suspect after black castles in this position that their position is just untenable? Bishop g5 is clearly winning for white in this position. And frankly you don't really expect black to lose so badly after queen c7 and rook takes a5. So this was a very nicely played game by white. He actually won game of the round in this tournament. And if you don't already, I encourage you to play the Wing Gambit. I'll go through some more games in the future, and also I'll get an opening theory video ready. And hopefully you can incorporate this devastating attack into your openings. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you next time.